I sat at the kitchen table, the one with the scratches from years of family dinners, staring at my mother across from me as she folded her hands like she was about to pray. But there was no grace in her eyes, only a sharp glint I'd mistaken for concern. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice smooth as the polished silverware she'd laid out for this so-called family lunch. "We're all here because we love you, and it's time you shared what your father left behind." The room went still, the tick of the wall clock suddenly loud in my ears. My siblings shifted in their chairs, avoiding my gaze, and I realized this wasn't a casual gathering. It was an ambush. After everything I'd done to honor Dad's wishes, she wanted me to hand over the inheritance like it was loose change. Let me take you back so you understand how we got here. My name is Clara, and I've always been the steady one in our family. Growing up in a small suburb outside Chicago, our home was a modest two-story with a backyard garden my father tended like it was his sanctuary. Dad was a quiet man, an accountant who worked long hours, but always made time for us, teaching me to balance checkbooks when I was 10, showing my brother how to fix a leaky faucet, listening to my sister's dreams over late-night cocoa. Mom was the spark, the one who organized block parties and church bake sales, her laughter filling the rooms. But even then, there was a restlessness in her, a way she'd eye the neighbors' new cars with a sigh. I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother, James, who moved to the city for a tech job, and my younger sister, Lena, who stayed local as a teacher. We were close, or so I thought. Holidays spent around that same kitchen table, the air thick with the scent of roasting ham and apple pie, Dad's deep chuckle blending with Mom's stories. When I married Tom 15 years ago, we built our life nearby, a cozy ranch house where our two kids, Mia and Luke, could run in the yard. I worked as a librarian, surrounded by books that offered escape and wisdom, while Tom ran a small hardware store. Life was simple, grounded. Morning coffee with the steam curling up like promises, evening walks where the streetlights buzzed softly overhead. Dad's illness came slow, a shadow that crept in over months. Lung cancer, the doctors said. From years of smoking he gave up too late. I was the one who drove him to appointments, held his hand during chemo, listened as he whispered his regrets and hopes. Mom was there too, but her visits felt performative, arriving with fresh flowers that wilted too soon, chatting brightly about neighborhood gossip while Dad's eyes grew distant. James called from afar, Lena dropped off her students' artwork, but it was me who sat through the nights, the hospital room smelling of antiseptic and quiet despair. When Dad passed 2 years ago, it hit like a wave that pulls you under. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and murmured condolences, the rain pattering on the tent like tears. Afterward, the will was read in the lawyer's office, the air stuffy with leather and old paper. Dad left the bulk of his savings and the house to me, the one who'd been there, he said, in a letter, to carry on responsibly. It wasn't a fortune, but enough to secure our future. College funds for the kids, a cushion for Tom's business. The house stayed with Mom, of course, and smaller sums went to James and Lena. Mom nodded then, her face composed, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, like a match struck in the dark. Life moved on, or tried. I visited Mom weekly, bringing groceries or helping with the garden Dad loved, the earth cool under my fingers as I weeded, the scent of fresh soil grounding me. We'd sip tea on the porch, the swing creaking gently, talking about the kids or the weather. James sent money occasionally, Lena dropped off her students' artwork, but subtle shifts started creeping in. Mom's calls grew twice a week now, her voice brighter at first, then edged with urgency. "Clara, darling, the furnace is acting up again. It's freezing in here." I'd send a check, small enough to help without dipping into the core. Or, "Lena's car needs new tires. Poor girl works so hard." Another wire transfer, my fingers hesitating over the keyboard in the dim glow of my laptop. Each time, she'd thank me profusely, her laugh tinkling like the wind chimes on her porch. But there was an undercurrent, a pull that made my chest tighten. I started keeping a notebook, nothing formal, just jottings in the margin of my planner, dates, amounts, her words. It felt silly, like I was suspecting a thief in my own blood, but the unease grew, a low hum I couldn't ignore. Tom and I talked it over one rainy Saturday, the kids at soccer practice, the rain pattering against the roof like impatient fingers. We sat at our kitchen island, mugs of chamomile steaming between us, the herbal scent soothing but not quite enough. "She's testing the waters," Tom said, his voice steady, the way it always is when he's fixing something practical. "Your dad made you executor for a reason, but family's tricky. Money makes it trickier." I nodded, tracing the rim of my mug. He was right. Dad had trusted me with the numbers, the decisions, because I was the one who listened without rushing. But ignoring Mom's hints felt like ignoring a leak in the roof. Eventually, it floods. The real turning point came in late October, the air crisp with the promise of leaves turning. I'd stopped by Mom's unannounced, a habit from when Dad was sick, just to check in. The house looked the same from outside, faded blue siding, the garden beds I'd helped mulch last spring, but something felt off as I let myself in with my key, the door creaking softly. The foyer smelled of vanilla candles, too many lit at once, masking something sharper, like fresh paint or worry. "Mom," I called, hanging my coat on the hook by the door where Dad's old hat still hung, dusty and untouched. She emerged from the living room, smoothing her apron, her smile a touch too wide, her hands fluttering, betraying the tremor I knew from her anxious days. On the coffee table sat a stack of papers, bills mostly, the red stamps glaring like accusations. Mortgage notices, utility warnings, a letter from the bank about an overdraft. My breath caught. These weren't new. Some dated back months. How had I not noticed? We sat on the couch, the springs sighing under us, and she poured tea from a pot that had gone cold. "It's nothing, really," she started, but her eyes darted toward the papers. "Just everything costs more now. Your father always handled it so well." I flipped through them gently, the paper crinkling under my fingers, numbers blurring as I added them in my head. It was more than she'd let on. Thousands, eating into what Dad had set aside for her. "Mom," I said softly, "why didn't you tell me sooner? We can figure this out." Her face crumpled then, just for a second, before she straightened. "I didn't want to burden you. You're so busy with the kids, Tom, and what Dad left." There it was again, that word left, laced with something sharper than gratitude. She reached for my hand, her skin cool and papery. "But maybe if we pooled things, James could use help with his loans, Lena saving for a house. It would keep us all together like your father wanted." I pulled back gently, my heart pounding a rhythm I couldn't steady. "Dad was clear, Mom. The inheritance is for specific things, education, emergencies, not this." Her eyes flashed, hurt flickering to something harder. "Specific, Clara? We're family, blood. What's more emergency than that?" The room felt smaller, the air thick with unsaid things. I left soon after, promising to call the bank, but as I drove away, the rearview mirror caught her silhouette in the window, her arms crossed, watching me go. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay beside Tom, the ceiling fan whirring softly overhead, casting shadows like questions. Was she manipulating me or just desperate? Mom had always been the dreamer, Dad the anchor. Without him, was she adrift, grasping at whatever floated by? I wanted to believe the best, but the bills burned in my mind, and with them a seed of doubt took root. The invitation came a week later, slipped into my mailbox like an afterthought. A simple card, handwritten in her looping script. "Family meeting this Sunday at my place. Lunch at noon. Important. Let's talk about the future. Love, Mom." My stomach twisted as I read it, the paper crisp between my fingers. Future. It echoed her words from that day on the couch. I texted James and Lena, casual as I could. "You get Mom's invite? What's this about?" James replied quick. "Beats me. Probably just catching up." Lena, "Yeah, see you there. Miss you." I wanted to believe them, but as Sunday approached, the knot in my gut tightened. Tom squeezed my hand that morning, his calluses rough against my palm. "Go with an open heart," he said, "but trust your gut, too." I nodded, kissing the kids goodbye, their sticky hugs lingering on my sweater. The drive to Mom's felt longer than usual, the autumn sun slanting low, painting the road in gold. Little did I know that lunch would unravel everything. I pulled into Mom's driveway that Sunday, the gravel crunching under my tires like a warning. The house loomed familiar yet distant, the curtains drawn against the midday sun, casting shadows on the porch steps. I smoothed my skirt as I walked up, the fabric cool against my palms, and knocked lightly before using my key. The door swung open to the scent of pot roast simmering, rich and savory, the kind she made for special occasions. Voices drifted from the kitchen, James's low murmur, Lena's soft laugh. Mom appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile warm but her eyes calculating. "Clara, right on time. Come in, everyone's here." The table was set with the good china, the one with gold rims Dad bought for their anniversary, gleaming under the chandelier. James sat nursing a coffee, his tie loosened like he'd come straight from a meeting. Lena fiddled with her napkin, her usual brightness dimmed. We hugged, quick, perfunctory, and I took my seat, the chair scraping against the wood floor. "This looks lovely," I said, trying for normalcy, as Mom served plates, the steam rising in lazy curls. But the air hummed with tension, like the quiet before thunder. We ate in fits and starts, small talk about the weather, the kids' soccer games, James's latest project. Mom steered us gently, her fork tapping the plate rhythmically. Then, as dessert, apple crisp, still warm from the oven, was passed, she set down her spoon. "All right, loves, we're all here for a reason. Your father, he left things in a way that doesn't quite fit us now." Her voice was even, but her knuckles whitened on the tablecloth. I froze, the crisp tasting suddenly bitter. "What do you mean, Mom?" She glanced at James and Lena, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Clara, you've got the lion's share. It's generous, but unfair. James needs it for his debts. Tech startups aren't cheap. Lena's dreaming of that down payment. And me, the house is falling apart without your dad. We think it's time to split it equally. Family helps family." The words landed heavy, the room shrinking around them. James cleared his throat. "It's not about taking from you, sis, just balancing. Dad didn't know how bad things would get." Lena reached for my hand across the table, her fingers warm. "We love you, Clara. This keeps us together." I pulled back, my chair scraping loud in the silence. "This is an ambush. You planned this, invited me under false pretenses?" My voice trembled, but I kept it low, dignity holding the edges. Mom's eyes welled, but not with regret, something closer to defiance. "No, sweetheart, it's a conversation, one we've needed. Your father trusted you, but he didn't see this coming. The bills, the struggles." I stood then, napkin falling to the floor like a surrendered flag. "Dad saw everything. He chose me because he knew I'd protect it, for the grandkids, for real needs, not this." The betrayal burned, hot and sharp, like touching a stove you thought was cool. They'd conspired, whispered behind my back, using Mom's charm as the lure. I grabbed my coat, the hook rattling in the silence. "I'm leaving. We can talk when it's honest, not staged." Mom rose, her voice cracking. "Clara, wait!" But I didn't. The door shut behind me with a soft click, the autumn air cool on my flushed face. I drove home in a daze, trees blurring past, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached. Tom met me at the door, the kids' laughter from the backyard a distant echo. I told him everything over tea in our quiet kitchen, the mug warming my cold fingers. "They trapped me," I whispered. "Mom orchestrated it all." He listened, his brow furrowed, then pulled me close, his shirt smelling of laundry soap and home. "You did right walking out, but now what?" I thought about it that night, lying awake as the clock ticked past midnight, shadows dancing on the ceiling from the streetlight outside. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was Dad's last word, his faith in me. Giving in would dishonor that, but ignoring them meant fractures in the family we'd all pretended was whole. By morning, resolve settled like dew on grass. I called the lawyer first, the phone heavy in my hand. "I need advice," I said, voice steady.
He confirmed what I knew. The will was ironclad, my role as executor binding. But family pressure, he added gently, that's the real battle. Next, I texted James and Lena separately. I love you both, but Dad's wishes stand. Let's meet one-on-one if you want to talk real needs. James replied hours later. Sorry about today. Mom pushed it. Can we chat? Lena, I didn't know it would go like that. Miss you. Mom called evening, her voice small over the line. Clara, you walked out on us. I breathed deep. You tricked me in, Mom. That's not family. Silence stretched. Then she sighed. I just want what's best for all of us. We hung up without resolution, the click echoing in my ear. The next days blurred, work at the library, stacking books with mechanical precision, the pages whispering secrets I wished were mine. Tom and I reviewed the accounts, spreadsheets glowing on the screen, numbers cold but clear. No extravagance there, just security. I started documenting everything, calls, texts, those bills I'd seen, not for court, but for clarity, a shield against the guilt that nipped at my heels. Word spread quietly, as it does in families. Aunt Grace called from Florida, her voice crackly over the line. Your mom mentioned tension. Everything all right? I told her the truth, measured and calm. She paused. Your dad always said you had his head for fairness. Stick to it. The confrontation had cracked the facade, but the real work was mending, or deciding what to mend. I wasn't ready to forgive yet, but neither was I ready to lose them. Family, after all, is a tangled root. Pull too hard, and everything uproots. The weeks after that meeting dragged like a heavy chain, each day clinking with unspoken words. I threw myself into routine, the library's quiet stacks, where the musty scent of books offered solace. Evenings with Tom and the kids, Mia's homework spread across the table, Luke's laughter bubbling over video games. But Mom's calls stopped abruptly, a silence louder than her pleas. James texted sporadically, "Can we meet? Coffee?" I agreed finally, at a neutral cafe downtown, the aroma of fresh grounds mingling with rain on the windows. We sat across from each other, steam rising from our mugs like fragile peace offerings. James looked tired, lines etching deeper around his eyes. Mom's struggling, Clara, more than she lets on. Gambling, online slots mostly. Started after Dad got sick. His voice dropped, fingers drumming the table. The revelation hit like cold water, sharp and awakening. Dad's savings for her depleted, her treats a cover for losses. She convinced us to push you, he admitted, staring into his coffee. Said it was fair, but I see now it's desperation. I nodded slowly, the pieces slotting into place, the bills, the urgency, not greed, but a hole she couldn't fill. Why not tell me straight? I asked. He shrugged. Pride, shame. You know, Mom. We talked for hours, rain pattering steadily outside. He apologized, genuine and raw, promising to help her seek counseling. By the end, we hugged, awkward but real, and I felt a crack in the wall between us mend just a little. Lena came next, showing up at my door with a bakery box, the sweet smell of donuts wafting as she stepped inside. We sat on the porch swing, the chains creaking softly in the breeze. I went along because Mom said you'd understand, she confessed, tearing a napkin into strips. But it felt wrong. I'm sorry. Tears glistened in her eyes, and I pulled her close, her hair soft against my cheek. We shared stories of Dad, his quiet wisdom, and she opened up about her own stresses, teaching burnout, saving for a home. I offered a small loan from my personal savings, not the inheritance. For you, not because of pressure, I said. She nodded, relief softening her faces. Mom was harder. She avoided my calls, her voicemail a barrier I couldn't breach. Tom suggested giving space, but space felt like abandonment. Finally, I drove over one evening, the sunset painting the sky in bruised purples. She answered the door in her robe, hair uncombed, the house dim and cluttered, empty takeout containers on the counter, a faint staleness in the air. Clara, she said flatly, stepping aside. We sat in the living room, the same couch where she'd laid out her plan. No tea this time, just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Why the trickery, Mom? The meeting, the pressure? Why not just ask for help? Her shoulders sagged, hands twisting in her lap. I was ashamed. Your father handled everything. Without him, I made mistakes. Bad ones. She confessed it all. The gambling app on her phone, small bets turning to chases, debts mounting like snow in winter. I thought if I got the money, I could fix it quietly, make it right. Tears tracked down her cheeks, silent and steady. I listened, heart aching for the woman who'd raised us with such outward strength, now cracked open. It's addiction, Mom, I said softly, not weakness, but manipulating us, that hurt. She nodded, wiping her face with a trembling hand. I know. I lost sight. We talked late into the night, the lamp casting long shadows. I promised support, therapy sessions I'd research, a budget we'd build together, but the inheritance stayed protected. Dad wanted it safe, I explained. For all of us, in time. Word of Mom's struggles rippled out quietly. James confided in his wife, Lena and her close friends. At a family barbecue Aunt Grace hosted, burgers sizzling on the grill, kids chasing fireflies in the dusk, the truth surfaced gently. Aunt Grace pulled me aside, her hand warm on my arm. You're doing right by your dad, and by her, holding firm. Mom attended, subdued but present, accepting hugs without her usual flair. No public shaming, just a shared understanding that mended fences slowly. James started visiting more, helping with house repairs, his hammer echoing Dad's old rhythms. Lena organized group therapy referrals, her voice steady on the phone. Healing came in layers, like peeling an onion, tears at each reveal, but sweeter at the core. Mom entered a program, her first session marked on the calendar in shaky pen. We met weekly now, not for demands, but for coffee and honesty, the steam from our cups bridging the gaps. The inheritance funded Mia's art classes, Luke's sports camp, small joys Dad would have smiled at. Tom and I grew closer too, our talks deepening, his quiet support an anchor. In the end, I found peace not in victory, but in boundaries drawn with love. Family isn't blind giving, it's truth tempered with grace. Mom's getting better now, one day at a time, and so are we, all of us, roots untangling to grow stronger. And there it is, my loves, the whole truth of that painful season when my own mother lured me into what I thought was a simple family lunch, only to face demands for the inheritance my father had trusted me to protect. It hurt deeper than I can say, feeling like the people who raised me, who shared my blood, saw me more like a bank than a daughter. But looking back now, I see the fear behind it all. Mom's hidden struggles, my siblings' quiet worries. Money has a way of twisting love until it barely resembles itself. What I learned and what I carry every day is this. Honoring a parent's wishes isn't about clinging to dollars. It's about honoring their wisdom, their foresight. Dad knew I'd be steady when others wavered, and standing firm, even when it made me the difficult one, brought us closer in the end. Boundaries aren't walls, sometimes they're bridges, built slow and strong. Mom's doing better now. Therapy, small steps, honest talks over tea instead of ambushes. James and Lena check in more, not for handouts, but for connection. And that money? It's still safe, growing quietly for the grandchildren Dad never met, just as he wanted. Family isn't perfect, darlings. It's messy, flawed, human. But when we choose truth over tricks, forgiveness over force, healing finds its way in. So I leave you with this question, straight from my heart. Have you ever had to stand alone to protect something entrusted to you, even when the pressure came from the people you love most? Would you have held the line like I did, or found another path? Tell me in the comments. I read every one, and your stories strengthen us all. If this touched you, share it with someone walking a similar road, and if you're new here, subscribe. We share these truths together, week after week. Until next time, Guard your peace, speak your truth, and love fiercely but wisely. Good night, my dears.